Folks, welcome back to the NBC Network, the Biz World channel. Today, a great day, a great show with a great discussion with a great guest. And we're going to be talking in the world of, I would say, sales. I would say persuasion. I would say maybe, convincing the others, decision making, decision sharing, whatever you want to call it, because my guest is going to bring us to a whole new level of understanding how it all operates and how the mind works in psychology and sales and all that stuff. So, welcome back to the Hurricane H Show. Today's guest is Patrick Vanderberg, a leading expert in ethical persuasion and certified trainer with Cialdini's Institute. So, for over 2 decades, Patrick has been helping professionals and organizations understand the science behind how people make decisions and how to communicate in a way that is both effective and ethical. Patrick, welcome to the show, man. This is great to have you, man. Really great to have you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always exciting to introduce this, especially to people who haven't heard of it, and it's sadly too many professionals. And I remember when I first discovered it, I was listening to Dr. Cialdini on a cassette tape actually, and it's like your eyes get bigger as it progresses, and you're serious? Is this how it works? And I see that reaction when I do a keynote or a workshop or I have students I work with. And so I'm hoping, we can't see them now, but I'm hoping that we can achieve a similar sort of reaction in your audience today. So thank you for putting me in front of them.
Oh no, no, I think we will. I mean, your energy just another one. I mean, you can tell someone who's actually always pitching, that looks like, I have you in front of me right now. I can see that. And by the way, I just want to also state this. I mean, you do have your own podcast, your own show, and so it's a lot of stuff that you can get not only from this particular episode here with me, but you can also seek, his work and catch up all the stuff because it's more advanced. And obviously, we can only back in a little in 1 hour, so there's a lot more to actually explore in his discussions. So I'll put that in there. Yeah, well, so let's talk about, first of all, you started in sales. I mean, ultimately, to as many of us, it's funny because sales is one of the jobs that I'd say people go to college, they get a degree, and most of the time they don't wind up in whatever degree they or specialty that they have, and they wind up doing sales. And I do believe personally that sales is one area that is needed, always going to be needed. I don't think it will ever go away, and there's always a need for talent and people to do it. And it's a hard job. Most people don't want to do it because it's challenging in a lot of ways. And also, there's some reputation that precedes us, and I would say rather in a negative way, because we're kind of, at least in my world, we say we're the second most hated people on the planet after lawyers. Because I don't know if that is actually true around the world, but in the US, we have this fun, thing about it because of the type of salesmanship, that we see out there. And, sometimes it's, the information is misconstrued or not accurate and so on and so forth. And therefore it creates that perception that these people are not honest and so on and so forth. And they're just pushy and aggressive and stuff. So let's talk about your journey that got you into the sales in general, and then we can dive into the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, how got I into business or sales? I mean, it's basically just helping people, isn't it? But my parents had a paint and wallpaper retail shop. And so when I was little, I was always, you know, didn't want to go, but dragged to the shop and do my homework there. So I grew up around all this, and my parents had, built great relationships with their clients. I always had the option to take over the business if I wanted to, which in the end I didn't want to. But I ended up doing retail college and those sorts of things. So I was always sort of steaming in an entrepreneurial direction. And then I picked up a passion for scuba diving that took me to scuba retail, that then brought me to becoming a dive instructor, started traveling the world, and yeah, ended up in Thailand, Curacao in the Caribbean, and then eventually Australia. And then here I ended up in scuba diving equipment wholesale. So I was looking after 3 states of Australia, which is quite a piece of land, quite a stretch. So I used to, drive in the car, cassette tapes going, the rolling university idea. And so I was always listening to something educational. And that's also how I first got exposed to Dr. Cialdini.
Wow. Well, first of all, fascinating. I mean, scuba diving, that's a That's it. Well, first of all, it's funny because you started in the business of retail and, parents, small business, family, owned. Oh, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a beautiful thing because you started early, really facing people, understanding the dynamics. Ultimately, you find another, passion, and scuba diving is pretty cool. I mean, I have not tried, I've tried snorkeling, so that's as close as I got into like getting underwater. And it's beautiful when you're on the reef and stuff and you get close to all the beautiful nature that's under the water. But I guess when you scuba dive, I mean, it's just much better. I mean, I have yet to try it and test it out. A good friend of mine actually just got certified, and now he's kind of like an expert, and he does quite a good dives. And of course, you mentioned some very exotic areas of the oceans out there. Curacao, actually, I've been there. It's a beautiful area as well, and certainly, you know, uh, it's just the waters there are just gorgeous in that whole
Yeah,
Caribbean.
it's beautiful. It's relaxing. Once you're under, once you know what you're doing, it's relaxing until you get
Well,
to
of
that
course.
point. Then
Well,
it's
I mean,
maybe not so relaxing.
well, it is a risky, stuff if you don't know what you're doing. I mean, certainly, you got to know what you're doing with your tanks and your oxygen and your going up and down. We had actually a show about, with a scuba diving instructor and trainer, a while back. And so it's pretty cool, stuff. But here's the dynamic question I'm sure everybody would like want to know. I know it's not really the core of our discussion. Have you seen any sharks?
Of course, of course.
All
But that's
right.
the fun thing with a dive boat that's got scuba divers on it. If you yell shark on the beach, everybody runs out of the water. When you yell shark on a diving boat, everybody grabs their camera and jumps in the water. So a little different. It's all good.
Well, it's also just I mean, is it really? Because the movies make them like look like the worst beasts in the planet, and I hear otherwise from experts. I mean, they're obviously magnificent creatures. They're dangerous, of course, but most of the time they're not gonna bother. Is that the truth? I mean, from an expert that spends a little bit more time with them in the water versus like someone just like me who would be like, oh my God, shark, and then everybody runs.
I think that's generally true that sharks are not attracted to scuba divers per se. Of course, there's a whole debate about, when somebody's swimming that, when you're thrashing the water, you could make this similar sort of vibrations as a seek or weakened, weakened animal or seals, or, you can get some mistaken identity happening. What I do think is a bad idea is those shark cages, right? And as a tourist, you can go in those and you can take some pictures of a great white shark and that sort of stuff. Those sharks get attracted by them throwing lots and lots of blood in the water, right? And I like chocolate, right? If you if you put chocolate all through the room, I go a little crazy, right? And so the sharks do the same thing, but I think essentially what they're doing is they're training those sharks to associate blood with the shape of a human being. So I don't at all disagree with that. I think we should stop doing that immediately. But I think generally, certainly when you're scuba diving, when you see a shark, it's only a moment because they tend to disappear quickly.
Wow. Well, it must be some site. I mean, it's like Jaws, the movie with it goes in your mind with the music theme and everything going on there. Well, so thank you for that. Just a little moment there because you mentioned scuba diving. Now here's another thing you mentioned that's pretty interesting, and you really depicted the typical salesperson of back in the days, driving cassette tape running and just listening to audio files and presentations and stuff like that. I mean, that's pretty cool. And but I love that because today is podcast, very similar, digital wise, but that's what a lot of people actually are doing, and they're getting a lot of good nuggets, insights, and expertise through that. Same thing you did. You learned some of the stuff, the basics, or the basic principles from Robert Cialdini's, work, and that kind of contributed to who you are today and what you do. So now let's deep dive now. What is the science behind how people actually make decisions? Because I think sales is about contributing to people's deciding whether they want to get something or at least convince people to get a product. How they do it, whether they do it right or not, that's a whole different thing. I mean, you talk in your world about persuasion and manipulation and all the stuff. So let's kind of frame the work in there. How does it all work?
Sure. And thanks for asking that question. And to set that up a little bit, whether it be sales or whether you're trying to convince some of your employees to follow the safety procedures in your business, or if you're trying to talk to your children to clean up their room, or your partner where you might go on the next holiday, or to your local council because you want to expand the premises of your business or something. Whenever we have a goal that we're trying to achieve and there's other people that need to agree with that, then we are reliant on our ability to be persuasive or to convince other people. Might be a good point to highlight the word manipulation. When we say persuasion, a lot of people think manipulation, and that is exactly the reason why I always tend to sandwich that word ethical in front of it. Manipulation is about giving somebody no choice. Persuading someone is about giving somebody options and choices. And that can be done ethically and unethically using science. And the science of how decisions are made, and I think we should dive into that, how that works, basically explains how you can raise the right pieces of information so you make it easier for people to make a yes decision if it's within them. So there's no need to lie or cheat. And so using persuasion science in an ethical way has shown to produce short-term results, but also long-term success and strong, loyal relationships, where the unethical use of persuasion science has shown to possibly produce short-term win, but it is long-term disaster because we get found out when we're when we're lying, when we're manipulating. People don't tend to return to a situation where they did not do well in the bargaining. And especially now with social media, you can destroy a personal or a company brand in days. So it's very risky to use strategies, even if you just know a handful, to use those in an unethical way, because you could be risking a lot. And a whole deeper level with that is that if you have employees working with you, we've heard about the war on talent, right? It's difficult to get top staff because they have choices. They can go somewhere else. And people really, in their core, they don't like having to lie or cheat to get ahead in life. And so if the boss asks them to do sort of underhanded, unethical things, it nibbles away at them. And you might lose your best people because you fail to actually invest in learning what the science was all about, and you're using some strategies in an unethical way. And you were talking about sales. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've spoken to people and that say, you know what? Yeah, my boss, sometimes we get sales trainers in, we do sales courses, and I don't use any of what they teach because I don't like treating people like that, right? And so people are investing so much money in sales training, but when it's not ethical, if it doesn't sit well with our principles, and people don't use it anyway. So what is ethical persuasion about? Persuasion is that we use words and images to increase the chances that somebody will say yes to us. Meaning, if you ask it one way, you get a certain amount of yeses, a small amount of yeses. But if you ask the same thing, but in a different way, you get a lot more yeses. So that's where we're going to with this. So if you'll allow me, I'll dive into how decisions are actually made. And then from
Please.
there, you'll understand how the 7 principles that Dr. Cialdini came up with, how those actually work and why they're so powerful. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Actually, I was just going to ask about the key persuasion factors so that people should understand, and you just going right there. So go for it.
Okay, cool. And for those listening, I'm very much into sharing little strategies that you can use immediately. So you'll walk away with some tools you can use after or during this podcast. All right. So how are decisions made? So I'm going to lean on the work of a Professor Daniel Kahneman, who unfortunately died a couple of years ago. He was a professor in psychology and a behavioral scientist, and he won the Nobel Prize in economics in 2002. Now that's a little odd, right? Behavioral scientist wins Nobel Prize in economics. Now, normally you win a Nobel Prize for making an extraordinary contribution to that field, right? So what does a behavioral scientist figure out that has such an impact on economics? Well, his work was basically about decision making. And he disproved a popular belief that old economics used to have. And that belief was that human beings are logical, rational creatures, and we would therefore use logic and reason to formulate our decisions. And Daniel Kahneman proved that that's wrong. And so he explains it like this, and it's relatively simple to explain, so I'll relay it to you as well. All right, so when it comes to decision making, your audience's brain, or your own brain, and by the way, when I say audience, I'm not necessarily talking about an audience like in a theater style, right? Could be when you're presenting, right? But if you talking to an individual client, then that person is your audience. If you're talking to your children and you're trying to convince them to clean up their room, well, then that's your audience, right? Is the people receiving your message. That's the audience. So your audience's brain has two parts when it comes to decision making. System 1 and system 2. System 1 is the intuitive part of the brain. System 1 works fast. System 1 works automatically. It is basically outside of our conscious control. And we use it for everyday decisions. System 1 runs rather effortlessly, doesn't take an awful lot of energy. But it is error prone. Now, why is it error prone? System 1 likes to use shortcuts. Let's paint a picture. We are in a hi-fi store, computers and all that sort of stuff, and we're looking to buy a monitor. I don't know anything about monitors. I don't know what it takes to make a quality monitor, that it lasts, that it suits my purpose and all that sort of stuff. Now, I have options, right? I'm standing in the store. I could decide that I could leave the store and I could go to the library and I could start reading books about technology and monitor production. I could maybe there's courses that you could do to learn, and maybe you could you could work somewhere to try and find things out, right? But that's going to take you months. But after months, you would be able to return to the hi-fi store and you'd be able to make an educated decision about which monitor to buy. But I don't know about you. I don't have the time for anything like that, right? And so somewhere in the back of my head, a little shortcut might pop up. A shortcut like expensive equals good, right? We've learned from experience that most of the time when we spend more money on something, we get something that's better suited to purpose, and it's going to last us longer. And so in that moment, I could go, you know what? If I just spend a little bit more money than I was planning to do, and I'll pick this one, then I've probably done the right thing here today. And you know what? That's exactly what will happen. You will probably have done the right thing today, because more expensive things are typically better, but not always. So sometimes this shortcut doesn't work, but most of the time it does. And so it is a shortcut for us to a quicker decision. And the monitor is in our trolley, and I'm off to the next aisle where I have to make another decision about something I know nothing about. Right? I'm faced with the same problem. All right, so other shortcuts like that are, if a lot of other people are doing it, it must be the right thing to do, right? We follow the actions of others. That's why we collect testimonials and reviews when we're trying to sell things. We share those with people. Okay, so that's system 1. Yeah, you got any questions at this stage?
No, just a trending, like we follow trends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, so system 1 is intuitive. Great. Very little effort to run, automatically outside of our conscious control. On the other side, we've got system 2. Now, system 2 is our logical part of the brain. Now, this works slowly, and this is conscious thinking. And system two, it looks at all the information that we have, and it comes up with the logical, rational decisions. If we have to buy or decide between two washing machines or something, it'll be system two doing the work, right? And so system two is more reliable, but it takes a lot of energy to run. And Daniel Kahneman actually refers to it as the lazy controller. It doesn't actually want to engage. It's quite happy for system one to take the decisions. Okay. Now, Daniel Kahneman demonstrates in 2002 that 90% of our decisions, that's 90% of our decisions are made by system one, outside of our conscious control, largely made by shortcuts. And so 10% would be system one. Later studies say that this would be 95% of decisions nowadays, because 2002 is a long time behind us, right? So arguably 5% of our decisions are made by our logical and rational part of the brain. Now, some people argue with this. They say, well, maybe if it's really, maybe if it's an everyday decision, I would use system one. But if it's really important, I would use system two. I would use logic and reason. So let's unpack that a little bit. Now, I understand that your audience is in, of course, the medical industry. So normally I have a retail example, but where I say a house or property, you could think a centrifuge that a laboratory might need, right? It's basically the same thing. So, but we all know real estate. So let's look at that for a minute. So when we want to buy a house, we tend to maybe start looking at a map or a website, and we decide which suburb we might want to live in. And then maybe we'll research how the value of property in that suburb increases compared with the value of properties in the surrounding areas. Then when we fine tune where we might want to live, now we're going to go and inspect homes. And you've probably done that, right? And so you turn up with a notebook or with a tablet, right? And you've got an Excel spreadsheet on there, right? And you keep track of every single house that you've been to, right? And you keep track of how large the gardens were, or the balcony, how large the garage were, the bedrooms, how many bathrooms were there, the distance from the schools. You write everything down, right? And that's a lot of system two work. And then, you've seen all these houses, right? And now you need to make a choice. Okay, great. So you've done all this system two work. But how many times have you talked to somebody and they've just bought a house and they say something along the lines of, well, it was a bit above the budget, but we just loved the place, had to buy it. That's not logic and reason, right? So they did do all this system two work, but when decision-making time came, system one took over, right? And so here's the big problem. People rarely understand what actually changes their decisions or what they formulate their decisions on unless they know the science. So you can ask yourself, you can sit at a bus stop or in your office and think, how am I going to convince this client to buy what I'm going to walk in with tomorrow? Or how am I going to get my staff to do as I ask them? How am I going to convince them to do that? But when you're sitting there thinking about it, you're using conscious thought. And so you're at that time using system two. And system two tends to come up with the types of arguments, the types of reasoning that would need system two in the other person to process that information. But they don't have the time for that anymore, because most of our decisions are made by system one. And so what happens is that we give information to the other party, but we're overloading them. And they decide not to decide, right? So you can do 1,000 proposals, or you can make 1,000 sales pitches, and you might win a small percentage of those, right? Typically, we win less than half, probably, right? So you might win a small percentage of those. And the ones you didn't get compliance from, the ones that didn't buy, it's easy to think, well, if those were the yeses, well, then this majority, those are the no's. Well, not quite. A larger than you think percentage of those were not no's at all. They were indecision, right? Had you just given them a piece of information that their system one brain could have gone, you know what? This is probably the right decision for us. Then the decision would have been made. You wouldn't have created more uncertainty. You would have allowed them to make a yes decision if it's in their favor to say yes. And I can give you an example of how impactful that can be. I don't do that too often, but we had a good chat before I restarted, so here we go.
Please. Thank you.
All right, so Bose, right? Bose, the hi-fi company, they were launching a new piece of a new hi-fi system, and they were very excited and very proud of it. And they were doing their sales campaign, and sales were disappointing. And they asked Dr. Cialdini to have a look at the advertisement. Now, the advertisement was very technical, right? A lot of our medical advertising tends to be very technical as well. But our audience, and Bose's audience as well, they value also seeing those technical details. But the problem was the headline. The headline of the ad had an element in it that was actually working subconsciously against what Bose was trying to achieve. And we see this all the time as well. People think they're using something that should be very convincing, and they're actually doing the absolute opposite, very effectively using persuasion science the wrong way around. And Bose, or Bose's advertising department, had done the exact same thing. So Dr. Cialdini changed the headline to have a principle of persuasion, just a headline, it was like 4 or 5 words, that had a principle of persuasion in it, working for Bose instead of against Bose. And sales increased by 45% by changing a headline with the right piece of information in it. So there's a massive disconnect between what science knows and what business does, right? Because most people, or a lot of people, I mean, Fortune 500 companies, they know about Dr. Cialdini's work, right? And they've been using it quietly for years. I mean, he published that book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, back in 1984. And this year, again, it was on the top 1 position of Forbes's Timeless Reads article, right? How decisions are made has not changed. The hardware up here in our heads hasn't changed, but our world is changing, overloading us more. And when we're so overloaded with information, people step back from your proposal and your genuinely good for them proposition, and they decide not to decide. More than ever now, they need these pieces of information that can count as shortcuts. And then big things can happen, as in the losses that you're incurring now in terms of time, resources, competitive advantage. You don't need to lose those. You just need to know some science. And like you said, of course, you can't get that from just this podcast alone. I'll give you some tips and strategies to walk away with. You can go to my podcast and you can get more of those strategies, but you really ought, and your sales team really ought to know this through some formal training, which is really a life skill. Even the World Economic Forum, in the Future of Jobs reports 2025, ranked leadership and social influence, which is another word for ethical persuasion, as the 3rd most urgent skill for businesses to develop. So does this make sense so far, Hurricane?
This is powerful stuff. There's a lot of stuff, and it's funny you give the example of Bose, and I just had a show that's going to air about marketing and the importance of message and communication, and how that message can make a difference. And to your point, that headline alone, kind of destroyed the whole picture. Yes, you can be all whoever you are, but if whatever you do does not hit, to your point, the system that is operationally, going to make that core assistance in decision making, then you lose all the stuff. And to your point, also one of the things why I think salespeople in general kind of fail. To your point, is they learn all these bad habits, and they're just so immersed in the idea, just want to close and convert, but they not really get into that decision point. To your point, like they're just literally unresolved objections or unresolved decision pieces in the brain that hasn't they haven't been actually, I guess, constructed well enough to actually make that final call. Hey, listen, I want this. 'Cause to your point, that extra stuff that are no's, they're not really no's. They yes somewhere else because they'll probably buy something else anyways, but they just didn't buy from you because you missed something. And I think that's the issue that I personally found also in sales. Are you asking the right questions? Are you really understanding what the needs are for these people? Are you really there for solution? Is just blubbering. I mean, my wife and I were just having a discussion about this a couple of months ago because we were buying some stuff, and these salespeople, they were like literally selling off and on different products in their shop, not even asking us what really we wanted. Like they were telling us everything about the stuff that we were not interested in. I'm like I really, I told him, like, I need to speak to someone because I'd like to train these people because I haven't, I don't understand why they're doing it because they're not even close to where we need to be. And I try to use the logic. Obviously, emotions are great, but to your point, we all have the impulse of buying stuff because we want, it looks good, it feels good, and there's a lot of stuff like. But really, like, what is it going to mean to me? How's it going to work with me, and so on and so forth. To use some, at least I decide on those things. Financially, physically, you name it. I mean, there's certain things that I look for before. And I'm like, why people are doing this? I mean, really, like they think that they're gonna pitch and sell, but they're not selling anything because they're not really convincing me otherwise. They don't even know what I'm looking for. They don't want to know what I'm looking for. They actually tell me, well, this product is not gonna work. I'm like, hello, you don't know what's gonna work for me. But I think that's really the thing. Like, so they give you the fluff, and the best example is real estate. And it's funny because I've actually couple of months, like last year, we sold a house, and the agents that were walking in, I mean, I was like, what the hell? What's wrong with these people? They were not doing anything to assist with the decision making. They were just standing there and like, here's the bathroom, here's the kitchen. I mean, like, duh. I mean, it's like I know what a bedroom looks like. I mean, what did you do special? What's the aha moment here? Like, that's gonna make me buy this particular property. They assume that the person is just gonna make a decision, but there's a science behind it, which is as you're working here, like these are principles that make a difference. You gotta get into the mindset, you gotta get to the logics, and get people to really see what it is. And that's the problem. I think we're way short on this. And I think to your point, a lot of trainings out there may not be as effective because they don't touch on these particular levels that you're actually. I mean, I have to say this. I've had a lot of discussions about sales, done a lot of trainings and stuff. This is probably one of the first places where, today, where this is going down to like, the ultimate psychology science of sales, deep dive with decision making and system one, system two kind of concept. I have not heard that before from any trainer that I've worked with. Now, I train myself sales. I mean, I talk psychology. I talk about the importance of, clarifying all the objections, making sure that it's, like get some tie downs, get some buy-in in the concept, logic. And I also believe personally, sales is not really sales. It's really consultation. It's really advising. It's really understand because it's not. This product may not be for everyone. And so therefore, I'm not going to sell everyone, but I know this product is for someone. And so I need to find that this now, could I sell it to everyone? Sure. Salespeople can convince people through manipulation and just, desperation and so on and so forth. Those will be the unethical approaches where aggressive, pushy sales or like even like, just giving you the wrong decision, pulses and kind of like, oh my God, the world, you're not going to have this anymore. The world is going to end, creating some panic attack, and you have some of those things which are technically, at least in the US, I can tell you this, whether it's real estate or insurance, those are my spaces, it's highly regulated, and ethics is usually a course that's always attached to your courses, to your licensing, and to your renewals of your license. Because of the habits and the practices that are out there typically are just not really where they need to be, so that constant repetition and reminding of what should be ethical versus not ethical is a big deal. But I love what you said today. It's like it's all happening in how do we get the person or the audience to operate the right system versus the wrong system to really make the actual conscious decision as opposed to subconscious decision, which is like automatically through their own emotions. And that's actually a big deal. So thank you actually for breaking it down. By the way, I love that you brought me the concept of the book, and it is a powerful book, and it should be available to I think all sales departments and sales trading and learning development teams. But is there, like I said, I have not seen it in a lot of the areas, and I've been doing this for 30 plus years. I can tell you it's a miss. So we're gonna adopt that book, and we're gonna adopt your book too, because we're gonna talk about that shortly. But now let's talk about, I see on your screen there's a whole bunch of stuff that is listed there. Let's break it down. Let's go down the list. What do we have there?
Yeah, let's do that. And maybe, just to tag along with what you were saying before, I think a problem is as well that a lot of professionals, I mean, many businesses and professionals, they are successful because, well, they run a profit, right? They make the occasional sales, and the sales people make income. And so everybody's sort of happy, but they have no idea of what's slipping through their fingers. And if you'll allow me, I'll highlight this. It's one of my favorite case studies, which has got nothing to do with business. It was related to a university, but it highlights the point very nicely. I also dive into this on my first episode of my podcast. There's this university, and there is kids that are facing expulsion from school if they don't raise their grades by a full letter. And so the kids are separated into three groups who are all given, they're selected at random, and they're given three different set of instructions. They get the same support network is available to them, but the instructions are different. The first group was not asked to set any study goals. The second group was asked to set study goals and keep them in their head as they were, going through that time. The third group was asked to set study goals, write them down, put their name under it, sign it, make photocopies, and hand a copy to every student in their class. Now, the question is, how did these kids perform, right? In an action, in a goal that was, needless to say, important to all of them, right? All of them wanted to stay in school. So the first group who didn't set any study goals, 14% of those raised their grades enough to stay in school. 86% were expelled. Second group, they thought about their study goals and kept them to themselves. Did they do any better? You'd think so, right? No, still the same. 14% also raised their grades enough to stay in school. The rest was expelled. Now, the third group, again, remember, they were picked at random, right? And they were given different instructions. They did a lot better. Actually, 86% of those kids raised their grades enough to stay in school, and only 14% were expelled. Now, the fact that we now know that this set of instructions was much more successful, because of that, we now know how much the other two groups underperformed, which wasn't necessary. For a moment, put yourself in the shoes of mom and dad. If their kid just at random was selected to be in group 1 and 2 that got the inefficient instructions, their life, the trajectory of their life forever changed for the worst, most likely, right? Now, I hate to bring it to everybody listening to this, but if you have not done formal training in the science of persuasion, and it sounds like a university course in itself, you can learn this in about 20 hours, including in-person coaching as part of that. If you haven't done formal training, you're in the 14% group. You're in group 1 or 2. You just don't know you are because you don't know about this other option that's there. So if we expand on that a little bit, and then I'll go into the principles. You were asking or saying, with sales, there's so many things that you do, and sometimes people sort of jump the gun and make assumptions. I think you'll appreciate this. We would argue that there's three sort of areas, three sort of levels that are important. The first one is relationship. If you don't like someone, you're going to go out of your way not to deal with them, right? So we need a strong relationship. Without that, everything else gets harder. So relationship is important. And there are, from the 7 principles of persuasion that we'll go into, there are particular principles which are great at building and repairing strong, lasting, loyal relationships. Then if we have a good relationship, people love us, right? Now it's about what it is we're offering. And you were saying objections, right? I would say that is uncertainty. In sales, you often hear, well, you just haven't, you're not demonstrated enough value yet. Well, I would say there's still uncertain, right? When people are uncertain if what it is you're offering is right and perfect for them, then they're not going to move forward easily either or at all. So we want to reduce uncertainty, and there's principles of persuasion which are great for reducing uncertainty. Now, there's people that love you. You got a great relationship with them. They love your product. When I'm ready, I'm going to get your stuff. But they don't buy, do they? Right? Now we're lacking motivation, right? We want them to act. And so there's other principles which are great for motivating people into action. So have a think. If I can give you tools that can help you build a strong relationship, reduce uncertainty, and motivate people into action, is there anything else you need? I mean, I ask audiences with this stuff in my workshops and keynotes, and I get crickets, right? It's like, well, if you've got that, you basically got it covered, right? All right. Let's, I see your eyes are getting bigger.
I'm
right.
trying to figure out. I think you covered it, but hey, maybe there's some more stuff here. So give me the juice, man.
All right, cool. Let's dive into the principles of persuasion. So there are 7 universal principles of persuasion, and we call them universal because they work in all countries, all cultures, all languages, and all countries, right? So this is something that works everywhere. And it's very important because our cultures are intermixed to begin with, right? But it's also much easier now to do business with people in other countries. So this is something that works everywhere. All right, so let's run through them. So we have the principle of reciprocity. And by the way, all these words you've heard before, right? Maybe some of your audience have also read Dr. Cialdini's book. I mean, 7 million copies in 48 different languages, right? Considered by many top CEOs to be the best business book of all time. It really should be in your library. Now, all these words you've heard before, but that doesn't mean that you understand them fully. That doesn't mean that you apply them all the time. I speak to people all the time. They go, oh, I love Dr. Cialdini's work. And then I look at their brochures, I listen to their sales pitches, and I look at their website, and there's just no evidence of it, that they're using any of it. Or maybe there's a testimonial there, hooray, right? But they're losing out on so much else. So bear with me. So reciprocity, people have a tendency to want to give back to other people the same type of behavior that was first given to them. And in the context of compliance, we want to cooperate more with people that we feel we owe, right? And so in business, we've taken that as in, all right, we got to give people stuff, right? And in essence, that's sort of right? But a lot of businesses get this wrong. Let me give you a very simple example. On a lot of websites, people might put a downloadable ebook as a lead generator, right? Oh, we have this wonderful ebook. Just put your name in, your email address. We'll send you the download link, our gift to you. Nice try. It's not going to activate reciprocity, because reciprocity is about when you give something, and a gift is something that's given without a requirement needing to be met. In case of the downloadable ebook, it was name and email address first, and then I will give you the download link. It's not a gift, it's a reward, right? So I'm not saying it's a bad lead generator, but if you think that's going to activate the principle of reciprocity, you're making a costly mistake. Instead, you could have a PDF that people can just right-click and download. No name, no email required. And provided that is useful information they find there, now reciprocity is activated. It's very much like the supermarket you walk into and there's a tray there with pieces of cheese or yogurt or sausage or something, right? And most people think when they take the cheese, that will not change their behavior, right? But the data is very clear, right? You give things away, people buy more. And what I think is hilarious is that it doesn't matter if you don't like the cheese, because it's not about the cheese, it's about the behavior. You were nice to me. Now I need to be nice to you, right? All right, reciprocity. I'm happy to circle back to anything or do a follow-up episode. It's all in your basket, but take notes if you want to circle back to something. All right, so with reciprocity, we want to think, how can we help someone genuinely? Right? That's the key. How can we help someone? All right, liking. We like people that are like us. That's similarities. We like people who like us, and we like people who like us and say so. That's compliments. Now, in your typical sales training, they'll say, listen, if you're trying to sell your service or your product, then you need to do what you can so that I like you. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not the most powerful. Think about it. It's if you're trying to sell me, it's nice if I like you. But it would be more powerful if I got the feeling that you genuinely liked me. Because if you like me, you're going to look after me. I'm safe with you, right? So as sales professionals, we need to do some homework. If you've got, I mean, if somebody walks into the store you don't know, there's not much you can do. But if you've got a meeting tomorrow with someone, everybody's got a social media feed, right? You can do some investigation to figure out who this person is and what you genuinely like about them. You will like them more and people will sense that. Goodness, you might have things in common and you could raise that up in conversation. Now you got similarities. Oh, you like scuba diving too, right? Well, I ride motorcycles, right? I'm a sucker for motorcycle riders. If you ride a bike, it's like we're already good mates, right? So we need to do some homework. And again, genuine compliments are very powerful. Look for something you can genuinely compliment on. If it's your boss, then it might be a little less straightforward, but there's still ways how you can compliment your boss, but there might be a discussion for another time. All right, I'll move on. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, okay. Unity, let's cover that next. So unity is the last principle that Dr. Cialdini sort of uncovered due to additional research. And that's in that redone of his book, the newer version that came out in 2015. Often confused with liking. Liking is more about similarities, let's say, where unity is about feeling like we're part of the same community, a same group, right? If I can describe you and me as we, right, then unity applies. And co-creation is also part of unity, working with someone. So in sales, I think a lot of us do that, as in we ask people what's important to them, right? And we then formulate our proposals with them rather than saying, okay, right, this and this is what I need. And now I go away and I come back. Oh, well, this is going to be great for you. It might be. But if I work with you to put together what you really like, now we've worked on this solution together. It's much harder to say no to it in the end. So that's unity. We can circle back to it. Social proof. The fact most people know the word social proof. The fact that you know that word is because of Dr. Cialdini. He invented that word, basically. Before that, it was called consensus, which was a little bit harder to understand. So social proof, the actions of others. So the rule is people follow the actions of others, especially when they are numerous and when the others are similar to them and when we are uncertain, right? So that's why testimonials and reviews are so powerful. 98% of online shoppers say that online reviews are an important factor when deciding what and where to buy. Now, I'll give you something your sales people listening can all use tomorrow. You might go into a meeting and you might raise, let's say, 5 experiences of past clients of yours, 5 testimonials. And you've picked those 5 because you really like them. And today you're meeting, let's say, with an more, let's say, an older lady that runs a business on her own, let's say. And you've got 5 testimonials from different people with different age groups and sexes. Now, that's great. That's social proof. That's good. But if you were a detective of persuasion and influence, you realize that today you're talking to a mature woman. And so if you go into your collection of testimonials and you look for 5 reviews or testimonials of other mature women who did business with you and were happy, now you're using the amplifier of similarities. I mean, you can kind of feel it, right? If I present you a testimonial of this mature guy and this 18-year-old boy and this 25-year-old woman, and right, a mix of everything, compared to giving you 5 testimonials of other women who are just like, you can feel it, right? It's much more powerful. So you can easily do that. All right, so social proof, we follow the actions of others. Testimonials, by the way, is only one strategy or element of social proof. If you think that's important, there's so many other dynamics you're not using. Authority. We follow the actions or advice of other people who have more knowledge or wisdom on a particular topic than we do. This makes perfect sense. We can't know everything. And typically, if somebody knows a lot more about this than you do, we're typically better off following what they are saying, right? And so that's why when you've got a product or a service and you can support that with a research study or what a doctor said about it or a professor said about it, right, then that helps people to believe your message because, hey, if that doctor said it was a good idea, if that professor said it was a good idea, it must be a good idea, right? But you yourself are also an authority. You have expertise about whatever business you're in. But you can't turn up to a meeting, shake someone's hand and go, hi, my name's Patrick. Let me tell you the 35 reasons why you should listen to me today. And that's what a lot of professionals do. They sit there and sing their own praises. And at least the subconscious of your audience goes, you're full of yourself, right? You lose authority and you lose on liking. It's lose, lose. So you need to do that. You need to establish your own authority in a socially acceptable way. And I'm going to give you one. Before your meeting, send an email, maybe 2 hours before, or maybe the afternoon before. Send an email and say, hey, really looking forward to that meeting that we've got tomorrow at 10:30 at your office. I've attached a PDF which highlights a little bit about my background. And I'd love you to have a look because it'll explain a bit where all this stuff tomorrow is coming from. Right? And people are curious, they'll go and have a look. And then there you can say that you've got a master's degree in this and you went to that university and you got this award, and that sort of stuff. That is not considered boastful now. That's socially acceptable. And now you're going to step into that room and what you say, the words you say will be processed with the gravity that they deserve, right? If you fail to do so, that means that your meeting hopefully lasts long enough for them to realize you know what it is you're talking about. And you could have wasted all this processing power, all this authority from the very first minute you could have had that. So that's something you can easily do as well. All right, then we've got the principle of consistency. So people want to stay true to past actions and statements that we've made. We do so because in society, people don't like other people that say they do one thing and do something totally different, right? We have nasty names for people like that. And so because we judge others like that, we don't want to be judged by that, like that. So when we've done something in the past, when we've said something in the past, we want to stay true to that. That's why it's important to ask somebody, what is important to you when it comes to this centrifuge? Or when you're going to sign on to a wellness clinic, to get a membership, what's important to you, when it comes to your wellness and where you go and where you spend your money and those sorts of things. And then later, when your proposal comes on the table and said, listen, you said that this was important and that was important. I think we've delivered on this. Have a look, right? Now you explain what you've got for them. And because it matches what they said was important, it's now a lot harder to say no to it, right? Because it does match, which I think is highly ethical, right? If we ask them what's important to them and then make sure it does. All right. I'll move on. We can talk probably a day about each of these. Last one is the principle of scarcity. So we value things more that are rare, that are scarce, that are dwindling in availability. First of all, if something is rare or much wanted, then its quality must be higher. And because of our fear of missing out and our loss aversion, we have a tendency to not want to lose out on quality things. Also, when things are rare, then of course, if other people want it, then well, that must also be good. There's this really, I think it's an entertaining study of a test with cookies. They had a glass jar with 10 cookies in it, the same cookie. And they had another glass jar with exactly the same cookies, but only two. And the people were asked, separately, they were asked, one group was asked to take one cookie out of the 10 cookie jar. The other test group was asked to take the same cookie out of a 2 cookie jar. The people who took their cookie out of the 2 cookie jar valued every parameter more highly than the other group because it was more rare, right? There was only 2 of them in the jar.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything was better except taste, by the way. Scarcity changes our perception of it, but not our experience of it. That's interesting. So those are the 7 principles of persuasion. So we've dived into how decisions are made, right? And the principles are basically telling you what types of information qualify as those pieces of information that system 1 goes, this is probably a good decision for me. Is this someone that I owe something to? Right? Then I should probably go ahead with them. Is this person similar to me? Does this person like me? Then I'm probably making the right decision to say yes here today. Is this person part of the community that I'm part of? Well, then it's probably the right decision. That's what the subconscious is saying with all these pieces of information. And then a lot less people are not going to decide to not decide. They'll feel much more ready to make that yes decision. Does that make sense?
Oh, listen, I'm Patrick. I'm listening to you, and I have to say this: if I had met you a couple of years ago, you would be in a room with me in the training concept here, building this with the team. Because I can tell you this, it's funny because you and I we had a brief discussion, but it's funny that some of the stuff that you just related to, you and I we kind of engaged with before we even got into the show. I guess because the practice, right? So you and I on Podmatch, for example, we were already aligning and kind of working together and kind of getting a connection there. Before we started, I talked about the podcast and how I loved your work, and I meant it. It's not like it was just like one of those, hey, I love your work, but I actually love what you do because I this is a passion of mine, and not only about the podcast but really the content. Um, the idea of like I offered, for example, for you to be with us, right, in a network, it was not, there's nothing in exchange. I don't have, it's something that I've generally want you to do, and there's nothing to it. There's no, quid pro quo kind of concept. So it's funny because these are principles that when you apply them, you can feel the relationship. You can build, a rapport. Like again, we use the word report a lot in sales, right? That's really that connection, that credibility, all the stuff that is happening. So all these principles that when you think about them, right, they're not complex, principles, yet they are. They're easy, but you got to be kind of aligned with them correctly and be able to apply them in appropriate. And some people can say right now, well, I have only 10 minutes with a client. How can I get all this stuff that actually you can get a lot more than you think? And besides that, to your point, when you prepare yourself in advance, that's the other thing. People do not prepare. I mean, prepare, fail to plan to fail, right? So it's kind of like, also we go like, people, they're not ready and therefore they just don't know what to do when they face a situation, but you're really preparing in advance. You know what you're doing. You can get a different approach to everything, to your point, especially if corporate meetings or you're working with an account, right? So it's something that you build. And I love what you said, the unity concept, where it's not just me giving you spat out thing. It's really we're working together on what it's going to look like for you and your team, and therefore like you feel like I'm part of this, I'm building this together, and because to your point, you already spent enough time to build this. Like, what are the odds of doing this again with somebody else? And already I like you, we feel the unity, there's reciprocity. I feel like this is not a one-way street. All those things are like awesome, principles that, to your point, they're old principles. They're not new. They've been around. Yet,
That's right.
many of us
Some of
fail
them
them.
are you know,
Yeah,
thousands of
those are,
years out because they're linked to our survival.
but isn't that something like, it's not even, you know, uh, innovative stuff. It's really basic elements of humanity, of how we operate and how we should work. So it's using psychology 101, using connections 101, using like personal stuff. And if you do it right, you don't have to lie, which some of the attributes, to sales, about lying and misleading and, misrepresenting all these, the mis stuff. It's bad. You don't have to do any of that because to your point, this shows the correct stuff. As a matter of fact, I always say this: if you spend enough time with your clients and understand them, and to your point, get a nice little understanding of what they're really looking and hoping for, whatever solution you have, then you put the stuff. I love the example that you give about the students that actually have taken the time to write the stuff down and make copy and really, document all that, versus the ones that did none of that. It's really less. That's really homework, doing your job, doing the pieces that you need to do. You can't just wing this stuff up and expect it to happen. People do. And that's why they fail. Like, and we see a lot of churn in sales. People sometimes, to your point, the close ratio. I mean, you're in sales leadership, and what is the conversion rate? 20%, 25%. Now, ideally, I want you to be a 50, like you mentioned earlier, about 40, 55%, or 50% concept, right? Like midway there. Ideally, you want more, but it is a difficult place. But if you apply the principles correctly, you will have more and more chances to upgrade your conversion rate, to have a better relationship. And that's the other thing. If people like you and relate to you, and if they feel reciprocity, they feel all the stuff that we just covered, you're consistent with your messaging, we're consistent with your information, businesses talk. Businesses also copy from other businesses. They see the source. Oh, I want him. I want Patrick. How the hell did this company do that? And by the way, even for talent, right? Top talent get scoped out by recruiters by looking like how you did with a company. It's like, I want that guy, I want that leader there, I want them in my company, right? It's like sports, right? You see a good player, you know I want that player, I want to buy that guy, and have them into our team because they're gonna make a difference for us. I mean, one of my favorite players, Rolando, he's a big dude, right? He's a world star. I mean, him and Messi are the greatest, football, players or soccer players, if you want to call them. But guess what? People jump on those two because they know what they're getting, and then in their history they've been moving from one team to the other, and they get paid big bucks to move because someone sees the value of them coming to the team. And the same thing here when you have some real people that know how to deliver, you want them on your team. And so as a company, as a leader, as a salesperson, you want to have that ability to be able to create more clients, more, referrals. That only happens if, again, talked about testimonials. The first company you suck at, guess what? Nobody's going to even consider you, and you're not going to have testimonials to start with. And I love the analogy that you gave that, obviously, you can't go to a different group with something that doesn't apply to them and expect them to actually, buy in. I mean, listen, I worked with the senior markets. So in the US insurance, so we have the adult, like the seniors, like products. And, you have to relate to them in whatever that you do, whether in culture, whether in activities, whether in language, dress code. For example, when I started in sales back in the days, we were facing baby boomers. All right. So baby boomers dress nice. So you could not possibly walk in with a t-shirt into their home and expect them to respect you.
Because
so
you
so
wouldn't
we
be
had
like
to
them.
exactly we had to suit up. We had to look the part and be like, talk a certain way, respect the elderly kind of concept, which is old school. Many people may not even know what that means today, but back in the days, that's how it is. So when we did the presentation table, sit down with them, in the kitchen and talking about whatever products, they kind of respect that. So you basically are they looking at what they expect. And so if you don't match some of these things, you basically are off. Now, can you still be successful if you're very good at what you do? Yeah, but that's like to your point, that's the 14%. The bigger portion is going to be the ones that actually really nail it to the tooth, right? That making it happen. So those are some real powerful, tools. And by the way, you're right. We can do this. This is like could be a training for like, 20 hours is minimum, right? But
Yeah,
but
it's
so
not
so
not that much. And in relation to what you were saying, some people, they seem to be natural persuaders. They can just walk into a room and just somehow turns everybody's opinions around, right? But if you investigate what they're doing, they're typically they've just by chance bumped into a strategy, a way of doing things that's linked to a couple of principles, couple of strategies, and that works really well for them. And they use that. But if you ask them, how do you do that? They can't explain it. And the good news is that persuasion is a science, and therefore it can be taught and it can be learned. So you can absolutely be as persuasive or more persuasive than those people who are naturally persuasive. And the best example is actually Dr. Cialdini himself. He's not your gung ho, energy full, out there sort of persuasive individual you would think, right? If you saw him, but he's probably the most persuasive person in the world. He's probably be paid the most to be persuasive in the world, right? Other thing you raised, also interesting, as in you said, oh, you have 10 minutes. How do you fit this stuff in? The most important thing in persuasion, sorry, let me rephrase that. The hardest thing in persuasion is knowing what you want to persuade, because you can persuade behavior, but not end goals. So when you go, I've got a website and I want to sell more, well, that's an end goal. You can't persuade that. So we need to break that down. What behavior is it that we want in order to get those sales? So that's something you learn with training. And then the other thing is that you don't want to implement every single principle in a communication, even if it was there. You need to pick the right ones given on where you are with that person. Have you ever walked into a situation and they've just started talking about the product and then they go, oh, well, and we've only got 3 left, right? They skipped relationship, they skipped uncertainty, and they went straight for trying to motivate you to action. Might work with some, but not with most, right? So depending on where you are, you use the principles that are right for that situation. And then the other thing in persuasion, what's hard, is it needs to become a habit that you constantly look for, okay, hang on, what am I putting in this email? What elements, what can I do better, right? So you're constantly looking for it. That's the other hardest part. And that's, again, it's great that people are here listening to this, and I hope you got some ideas, and you can get more from my podcast, Ethical Persuasion Unlocked. But in the end, it's just little strategies we're sharing. It's not a course, right? This is a life skill. It's not that costly to actually get certified as a Cialdini certified practitioner. And depending on the line of work you're in, imagine if you're a sales rep, a real estate salesperson, you can actually tell your vendor that you're certified under the World Authority on Persuasion. Well, that might set you aside a little bit from your competition, don't you think?
I do, and actually, I think I missed on that. Personally, I mean, I did well, but I think I could have done better, if I had that. But certainly, it's never too late. Now that we have this, we have the access, especially for our new generation. I think this is something I can tell you this going forward, as I have an opportunity, this is going to be implemented in some of the work out there, because I think it's definitely going to make a difference. By the way, I just want to highlight quickly thing. I know we exceeded the hour, but this is so powerful here. I feel like we can spend another one. Obviously, I know you have, it's getting late where you are right now. But here's the thing, it's you talk about persuasion can be taught, right? It's there's a methodology, a science, and actually sales is an art. That's where your talent is, and that special person that you are. But really, a science, the methodology, these steps. There's certain things that you can learn, and really, if you apply them correctly and you learn how to use them, that's it. I mean, you score every time, and that's the whole thing. Now, people, to your point, they might have the skills, they just have the personality, they have the aura, the flavor, the energy, But if they complement it with all the other tools, it's like someone who's talented in football or soccer, but if they don't practice and they learn all the different techniques and stuff, it's not going to be anything that may work. But they come across someone that's more powerful than them and more technical, they might not, win. I mean, I'm in martial arts. It doesn't matter how good you are if you don't practice and build more levels and learn more and more and more and maybe diversify your techniques. You're not going to win in MMA. I mean, it's a little tough, right? So it's you have to sharpen your tools at all times, and those are the things that you have to learn in sales. I think the methodology that you just covered here, which is, you know, I mean, seven basic principles, yet they're the power of everything that you can do when you talk, in this world of us. So here's the thing. Now there is another book I see on your screen that is, I think, your book. So if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about it? I know we got to close, but I can't leave this without highlighting the book as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Hurricane. So, me and some of the other Cialdini Institute licensed trainers, we wanted to put a book together to help people with the practical application of persuasion. So, of course, Dr. Cialdini's book influences the definitive text and all this stuff. Not that just reading a book will get you the application skills, but I think it should be on your bookshelf and you should have read it. And it's a very entertaining read, by the way, Dr. Cialdini's book. And it's probably half, he actually wrote it to be more like a defense manual, against corporations trying to, manipulate you. But it basically turned into businesses coming to ask for answers. So you get a lot of self-defense out of it. But when it then comes to how do you apply this, that's what me and my colleagues tried to put together. So we each have a chapter and we come from a totally different angle. I explain a case that affected me early on in my career, and I dissect this whole situation. So you actually see how I use those principles and in which places. Leopold Ajami, who's actually from Dubai, where you are today, he talks from how do you use this in presenting perspective. Others are talking about how to, Martin John uses it, talks about, how to use persuasion in procurement, right? We're always talking about sales. What if you're buying, right? So anyways, this is, chapters on different topics. So nice compliment. If you don't own influence yet, perhaps buy influence and how to hear yes more often together. Read Dr. Cialdini's book first and then ours straight after.
Well, I have to say, it sounds like a great thing to actually always hear yes. Like there was that movie Yes Man. It was funny, but it's a different angle to it. But really, yes is what every salesperson wants to hear. Right? Everybody that is in this kind of line of work wants to hear, but you want to have the right yes. And that's another thing I just clearly I want to highlight is that, yes means yes for a long term, not yes and then people cancel on you in 3 days or in a week or, because that's another problem. People, when they think they got the sale, but they did the wrong, job, it's only a matter they get by remorse, and the next thing you know, people actually are moving away, and then it becomes bad reviews and so on and so forth. So again, when you do the yes, it has to be the yes that's going to stay for life, that's going to make you stronger and not weak at the end of the day. So I just wanted to actually highlight
let me give you one more. You say cancellations, right? Do you remember encyclopedias?
Oh yeah,
right.
Back in
now we've
they
got the
still
internet
exist.
search engines, right? But so people used to sell encyclopedias door to door, right? Big collections of books.
Britannica.
People would buy them, but it was typically door to door, and so people had a cooling off period, right? And so they would get so many sales, but then a large percentage would cancel. By just getting people, instead of the salesperson filling out the details on the purchase agreement, they turned it around and they got people to fill in the details. Now it's the co-creation and the principle of consistency kicking in and dramatically reduced canceling out. So even if you did the right thing and it was all coming from a good from a good point, you can still miss little strategies, little things you could do that have a dramatic impact on your results.
Well, thank you, Patrick. And it's funny because as a business owner, as a business leader and sales leader, I have to say, one of the things that people miss is that sales is not just acquisition, it's also retention of your clients, customers, or whatever, whoever you're dealing with. And that's really the biggest part of it. Because people sometimes you can get as many clients as you want and in the flyby kind of concept, but then the next thing you know, they're all gone and your retention is down the tubes and you're just failing. You're not growing. And that's the other thing. You cannot grow if you're just bringing top the funnel and feeding the top and then the bottom is actually leaking. It's just, putting water in the sand. And you can't get there as a business leader or sales leader unless you actually understand the concepts of your sales strategy and how your teams are doing. This is exactly what's needed. And so again, I'm saying this to people: if you're watching this or listening, doesn't matter if you're an owner of business, you're an actual training individual, or you're just a sales leader. I think you might want to take a look at, I would say, Patrick's work, Patrick's podcast, and definitely reach out to Patrick. And that's my question to you: how can people work with you, Patrick, in terms of training and really, because it's one thing to actually, everybody can read a book or listen to a book or CD, but putting things to practice takes a lot of play and testing and really practical stuff. You use that, so those days of training are more to get the people to really not only understand but apply things in real practical role plays and situation scenarios and things like that. Makes a big difference. So how can people work with you, and are you available to people worldwide, and how that would look like, someone is interested anywhere?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So you can find me on my own website, ethicalpersuasion.com.au, because I'm in Australia, so it's .com.au. There you can find, everything we do. There's also a complimentary section there, so you can actually get a downloadable ebook. No email or name required. You can just right click and download. So it's a true gift, as we covered before. There's also some additional things that you can avail yourself on, and of course the podcast. In terms of learning this, if it's for a larger company, then often a keynote or a workshop is where we start, because it's a nice opportunity to see how this resonates with the entire team. Because big corporations, they spend a lot of money on training, and a lot of it is just not remembered 2 months later, or people have an adversity against it, don't use it. So a keynote or a workshop is a great way to, how we say, activate the team. As in, we can see people are really loving this and they're actually saying, oh, we want more of this. That's great. And then where that tends to go to is the certification training. Dr. Cialdini made a flagship course, and he's, of course, he's past 80 now. He's made a flagship course, which takes about 8 to 10 hours to work your way through, which are videos you watch of him training you. But in the ideal way of delivering, that comes with 8 weekly live sessions with myself. And so if this is for a business, then we might put groups of 12 in one course, let's say. So we keep it nice and small. And as we go through the information, they actually work on influence challenges that they have in their business. So throughout the 8 weeks, and it's spread over 8 weeks to increase the retention, because there's, of course, research on that as well. But over that 8 weeks, they actually generate strategies themselves for their own challenge, and they're able to bounce those off me. And then I can go, you got it spot on, or, ooh, little course correction needed. So after 8 weeks, not only have they learned everything, we focused on practical application, and they walk away with a strategy that they can immediately implement at the end of the course. So we can do that privately for businesses. But I also feel we have an obligation to also make this available to individuals. So I do plan public courses as well, that 1 or 2 people from a company could join and go through that 8-week process themselves. And there's also, more economical, cheaper options to do some learning. But if you'll take my word for it, is that Cialdini certified practitioner course with the live training sessions. That is the fastest way to learn this at the deepest level in that time period. So if you'll take my word for it, that's the thing to go for.
Thank you, Patrick. It's funny, I have to say, I don't know if you look at my screen, but my computer decided to give you a lot of thumbs ups today. I didn't plan this, and it just keeps popping up, give you a thumbs up and everything. I guess it got, my AI got excited about your work today, and it just went viral here. But it's amazing, because I think really, your this discussion is, for anyone that actually it could apply even in business, some of the in personal life, whatever these principles are not just for business. You could use them in real personable approaches into your day-to-day life, family members, I don't know, spouse, significant other, you name it, or just friends, because it does actually, build a very high, perspective of who you are and how you can actually integrate easily and work and get better responses from the rest of the people around you. Well, listen, Patrick, we've exceeded the hour. I mean, we're an hour and a half in, and we can keep going. I know you gotta go. It's the weekend here, but you know what? Thank you so much, man, for really a great time. A lot of powerful stuff that you shared with us. I mean, like I said, people can use some of this today to apply, but really just do the right thing and connect directly with Patrick and see how you guys can maximize this opportunity, whether as a leader, business, or individual. Anything you want to leave our audiences with, Patrick, before we close?
No, that's it. It was nice to be on here with you. I think you've got a great energy, and I think your audience is lucky to have you bring all these things to them. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Patrick. And that's the end of the show today, folks. I'm Hurricane H. We'll be talking soon on Daniel Sean.